Meghan Markle's image as a royal icon is shattered as a new documentary exposes her shocking past, her services on a yacht for just $100 an hour. In this explosive investigation, we uncover the truth behind Meghan Markle's early days before the palace. A bombshell new documentary reveals her surprising connection to luxury yachting, where she was allegedly paid a mere $100 an hour. But what does this mean for her carefully crafted public persona? Could this expose a side of Meghan that no one saw coming? Stay tuned as we dig deep into the scandalous secrets that have now surfaced, and why it could change everything you thought you knew about her. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The room falls silent as the screen flickers to life. A tense hush blankets the audience, and the opening credits of a new, shocking documentary begin to roll. The title alone sends a ripple of intrigue through the air, promising revelations that could once again turn the royal narrative on its head. The world has seen Meghan Markle through many lenses: the American actress turned duchess, the outspoken advocate for women's rights, the resilient figure who challenged royal tradition. But tonight, the spotlight falls on an aspect of her past that she likely never wanted to see illuminated. As the narrator's voice cuts through the silence, the audience is pulled into a world few knew existed, a world of glamour, secrecy, and controversy. This new documentary does not pull punches. In fact, it's one of the boldest productions to date, diving headfirst into allegations that have long simmered in the shadows. On screen, flashes of old photographs appear, some familiar, others buried deep within tabloid archives. A grainy image of a younger Meghan aboard a luxurious yacht. Another, showing her in the company of affluent, powerful men. The voiceover lingers, letting the gravity of the images sink in before posing a provocative question. Did Meghan Markle once live a life far removed from the polished royal image she now projects? The answer, the documentary claims, is yes. And not just any life, one marked by whispered tales of yachting, parties, and, more controversially, paid companionship. The claim that Meghan allegedly offered services at a rate of $100 per hour sends shockwaves through the crowd. It's a number that, juxtaposed with her current status, seems almost surreal. But this is just the beginning of the tale, one woven with mystery, betrayal, and the undeniable complexity of human ambition. As the documentary continues, the narration becomes more pointed, suggesting that Meghan's past was not merely an innocent phase of social climbing, but rather a calculated effort to navigate elite circles. The revelations are unrelenting. Former yacht staff, blurred for anonymity, recount tales of late-night festivities and whispered exchanges between guests. A once-forgotten story now thrust into the limelight, forcing viewers to reconsider the carefully crafted public persona of the Duchess of Sussex. It is in this context that the documentary takes a darker turn. For years, rumors had swirled around Meghan's past, but they were dismissed as baseless gossip, mere fabrications of a ruthless press eager to tear down a successful woman. Yet, now, with purported evidence and eyewitness accounts, the narrative becomes harder to ignore. The filmmakers make it clear their intention is not to vilify, but to expose truths they believe were deliberately hidden from public scrutiny. The documentary's creators insist that their aim is to shed light on a reality far more nuanced than the fairy tale that captivated millions when Meghan first joined the royal family. In an interview segment, a former industry insider shares a candid reflection. People want to believe in a Cinderella story. Meghan's journey from an American actress to a royal was something out of a fantasy. But sometimes, we forget that real life is far messier than a scripted romance. His words echo the underlying premise of the film, that behind every carefully curated image, there is a more complicated, often inconvenient truth. This film also questions how much the palace knew before Meghan and Harry's whirlwind romance captured global attention. Were there warning signs, concerns, or evidence that was deliberately ignored to preserve the couple's budding relationship? As speculation mounts, the documentary cuts to a segment detailing the royal institution's history of handling scandals. From the abdication crisis to the more recent controversies involving Prince Andrew, the royals have a well-documented strategy of keeping unsavory details under wraps. Did Meghan's past fall under the same protective umbrella? Amid the fallout, public opinion becomes fiercely divided. Supporters of Meghan rally to her defense, decrying the documentary as an unforgivable invasion of privacy and a sexist attack on a woman who dared to rise above her station. Critics, however, argue that truth must prevail, regardless of the discomfort it brings to those involved. The documentary becomes a lightning rod for debate, sparking think pieces, panel discussions, and heated social media exchanges. In a particularly gripping moment, the film addresses the broader cultural phenomenon of yachting among celebrities and social climbers. This segment offers a historical perspective, pointing out that Meghan is not the first, nor the last, to be ensnared by such allegations. The filmmakers delve into the murky world of high-profile parties where famous faces mingle with wealthy patrons, blurring the line between socializing and transactional relationships. As the documentary progresses, Meghan's legal team issues a statement, categorically denying the allegations and condemning the production as defamatory and damaging. Yet, despite their attempts to discredit the film, the public's appetite for controversy remains insatiable. The documentary's release marks a pivotal moment, one where admiration and disdain collide, and where the line between public interest and personal attack becomes increasingly blurred. Harry, too, finds himself caught in the crossfire. While he has often defended Meghan's integrity and character, this latest controversy places an immense strain on their public image. Some royal commentators speculate on how the Duke of Sussex will address the allegations, if at all. Will he stand by his wife unconditionally, or will the pressure to preserve the monarchy's reputation force him into a more nuanced stance? For Meghan herself, the ordeal is nothing short of a nightmare. The documentary portrays her as a woman ensnared by her past, haunted by choices that now seem to threaten the life she has built. The film's conclusion offers no clear answers, only more questions that linger long after the credits roll. And so, the story remains open-ended, leaving viewers grappling with the duality of Meghan's existence, a figure who embodies both triumph and controversy, a woman whose past refuses to remain buried, and a royal whose every move is scrutinized with relentless fervor. As the screen fades to black, the question remains, will Meghan's legacy be defined by her resilience and transformation, or will the specter of her past continue to cast a shadow over her future? The documentary's narrative does not waste time. It dives straight into the heart of the allegations with a relentless focus on details that have been, until now, mere whispers in the dark. The first chapter opens with a series of panoramic shots of luxury yachts gliding over pristine waters, their white hulls gleaming under the sunlight. The narrator's voice is steady, almost clinical, as it begins to peel back the layers of secrecy surrounding the world of high-end yachting. It describes how, for decades, these floating palaces have served as sanctuaries for the world's most powerful and influential figures, politicians, billionaires, and celebrities, all converging away from the prying eyes of the media. It is a playground where deals are made, secrets are exchanged, and relationships are formed that rarely see the light of day. Against this glamorous backdrop, the documentary presents its first major revelation, Meghan Markle's alleged connection to the world of yachting. According to the film, her involvement was not just a passing phase, but a well-established network of appearances on some of the most exclusive yachts that frequented the Mediterranean and Caribbean coasts. The documentary features blurred-out interviews with supposed former yacht staff, each recounting moments of seeing Meghan aboard these vessels, mingling with affluent guests, and, in some cases, disappearing into private quarters with high-profile clients. The details are vivid: sunset dinners on the upper decks, champagne flowing freely, and late-night gatherings that stretched into the early hours of the morning. The film cuts to an anonymous interview with a woman identified only as Jane, whose voice is distorted for privacy. Jane claims to have worked as a stewardess aboard one of the luxury yachts Meghan was allegedly spotted on. Her account is both compelling and unnerving. She describes Meghan as charming and effortlessly social, capable of navigating conversations with men twice her age with a finesse that suggested experience beyond her years. Jane recalls one particular evening when Meghan allegedly entertained a group of business magnates on the yacht's upper deck. The evening started with cocktails and light conversation, but as the night progressed, the atmosphere grew more intimate. Jane insists she witnessed Meghan slipping away with one of the men into the yacht's private suite, only to re-emerge hours later, composed and unflustered. The documentary does not stop there. It presents what it claims to be evidence of Meghan's supposed fee for such appearances, a modest $100 per hour. This revelation is delivered with calculated drama, the narrator pausing just long enough for the audience to absorb the shock. The figure, comparatively low for the circle she was moving in, is portrayed as indicative of her struggle to break into Hollywood's inner sanctum, a time when financial necessity may have outweighed personal discretion. To bolster its claims, the documentary provides a paper trail, receipts, anonymous emails, and even what is purported to be a signed non-disclosure agreement barring Meghan from discussing her time aboard these yachts. It is worth noting that these documents, while presented with an air of authenticity, are blurred and partially redacted, leaving room for skepticism. Nevertheless, the impact is undeniable. The narrator leans into the implications, questioning whether Meghan's connections through yachting were instrumental in opening the doors that led her to Prince Harry. The documentary then shifts its focus to the broader yachting culture, painting a vivid picture of how these exclusive gatherings operate. Through hidden camera footage and interviews with former yacht staff, viewers are shown a world where privacy is a currency and discretion is the golden rule. It describes how powerful men would routinely request models for weekend excursions, with appearances arranged through intermediaries who handled the logistics with precision and secrecy. Jane's voice returns, describing how women were often flown in from across the world, sometimes under the guise of modeling contracts or promotional events, only to be introduced to wealthy patrons aboard these massive vessels. The documentary further explores how this culture is maintained through bribes, hush money, and ironclad confidentiality agreements that ensure the participants' silence. Those who dared to speak out often found themselves facing legal threats or worse, blacklisted from entire industries. It is here that the filmmakers pose a question that lingers ominously. Did Meghan Markle's ascent to royal status provide her with the ultimate shield from these allegations, allowing her to transcend a past that would have otherwise haunted her? The documentary's narrative arc takes a dramatic turn when it addresses Meghan's transition from Hollywood aspirant to global royal figure. It suggests that her strategic relationships, many of which were allegedly forged aboard these yachts, helped catapult her into elite social circles. Names are not explicitly mentioned, but the documentary hints at powerful connections, business moguls, media tycoons, and influential political figures who were regulars at these gatherings. The film insinuates that these ties may have smoothed the way for Meghan's entrance into the British aristocracy, positioning her as a viable match for a prince. There is a particularly chilling segment where the documentary explores the possibility of royal awareness of Meghan's past. A former royal aide, silhouetted against a dimly lit background, suggests that palace officials conducted thorough background checks before Meghan's engagement to Prince Harry was publicly announced. The aide implies that details of Meghan's yachting experiences may have been uncovered but subsequently suppressed to avoid public scandal. There are things you bury if it means preserving the image of the family, the aide states, his voice laced with regret. Sacrifices are made. Histories are rewritten. As the narrative unfolds, the filmmakers build a case for a systematic cover-up, orchestrated not just by Meghan's personal team but with the passive consent of the monarchy itself. They suggest that the palace's silence on these matters is part of a broader strategy to protect its image, much like previous royal controversies that were managed behind closed doors. The film draws parallels to past events, such as Prince Andrew's connections to Jeffrey Epstein, suggesting that the royals are well practiced in the art of damage control. Viewers are left with a stark image: Meghan, radiant in her wedding dress, waving from the balcony of Buckingham Palace, juxtaposed with grainy shots of her aboard lavish yachts years before. The contrast is striking, almost surreal, as the filmmakers intentionally frame her rise to royalty as a narrative woven with secrets and strategic alliances. The documentary's producers emphasize that their aim is not to defame but to reveal what they consider to be the untold truth. They argue that Meghan's public image has been meticulously curated to fit the narrative of a self-made success story, a rags-to-riches fairy tale that captivated the world. However, they insist that the reality is far more complex and far less pristine. Their final statement in this segment is delivered with an air of finality. The truth, no matter how deeply it is buried, always finds a way to the surface. The documentary wastes no time in ramping up its revelations. After setting the stage with the allegations of yachting and Meghan's supposed involvement, it shifts its focus to the mechanics of how this secret life allegedly operated. Through a series of interviews with yacht staff, former brokers, and anonymous sources, the film dives deep into the logistics of this high-end underground world. It paints a vivid picture of extravagant parties on the Mediterranean, where the elite gather in secret to enjoy luxury away from the prying eyes of the public. The narrator describes the scene: massive yachts stretching hundreds of feet, equipped with state-of-the-art amenities, private cinemas, pools, helipads, and suites that rival the world's finest hotels. For the rich and powerful, these yachts are more than just vessels. They are floating fortresses of privacy. It is within these walls that the documentary alleges Meghan found herself during her pre-royal years, mingling with influential businessmen and European aristocrats who rented these yachts for weeks at a time. To lend credence to its claims, the documentary brings forth a former yacht broker, his face obscured by shadows. His voice is low, deliberate, as he recounts how high-profile clients would request specific types of women to accompany them during their time at sea. He explains the terminology used: eye candy, arm charm, and exclusive companions. According to him, Meghan's name appeared on guest lists more than once, particularly for events off the coasts of Monaco and Saint-Tropez, known hubs for the ultra-wealthy. The broker describes the process with almost clinical detachment. Arrangements were made weeks in advance, sometimes through modeling agencies that specialized in event appearances. These appearances, he clarifies, were not officially categorized as anything beyond public relations or promotional work, but within the industry, the expectations were well understood. The women were expected to socialize, entertain, and in many cases, provide company to these affluent clients. He stops short of making direct accusations but hints heavily that company often went beyond mere conversation. In a chilling moment of the documentary, footage is shown of yacht parties from years past. Though Meghan's face is never explicitly captured in these segments, the filmmakers suggest that her presence was confirmed by cross-referencing travel logs and yacht charters with paparazzi shots taken during her early Hollywood days. A former stewardess is interviewed, her voice shaky but resolute. She recalls seeing Meghan aboard one particular yacht off the coast of Sardinia. She was always well-dressed, always charming, the stewardess recalls. She knew how to work the room, how to make people feel important. But there was always this sense that she was aiming for something bigger. The documentary also explores the financial aspect of yachting. It reveals how guests, many of whom were wealthy businessmen and European elites, would offer payments not directly to the women but through third-party agencies that disguised the transactions as appearance fees or event bookings. Meghan, the film claims, was allegedly listed under one such agency, though her direct involvement remains speculative. The narrator questions the legitimacy of these appearances, suggesting that they were merely veiled transactions designed to protect the identities of the participants. For many watching, this segment of the film is where disbelief begins to waver. The production team lays out documentation, heavily redacted but seemingly legitimate, that ties Meghan's early travel records to known yacht events. The documentary editors freeze frame on a blurred image of what appears to be a yacht registry, with Meghan's name faintly visible alongside a list of other models and event companions. The implications are clear, though the proof remains just shy of irrefutable. The documentary takes another turn, diving into the culture of secrecy that surrounds high-end yachting. It describes a code of silence observed by everyone involved, from the crew to the guests. Confidentiality agreements are commonplace, with legal repercussions for anyone caught leaking information. The filmmakers suggest that this secrecy is what allowed Meghan to move within these circles largely undetected, avoiding the glaring lights of Hollywood paparazzi while forging connections that would later serve her career. Interviews with former yacht staff provide a glimpse into how this secrecy was enforced. One crew member recalls how phones were confiscated upon boarding, and guests were often given alternate names and registry logs to protect their identities. He describes how staff were instructed to address guests by these aliases, further ensuring that their real identities remained obscured. It was like living in a bubble, he says. A world where the outside didn't exist. You weren't allowed to talk about it, even after you left. The documentary pushes further, attempting to connect the dots between Meghan's time in yachting circles and her rise to Hollywood prominence. It implies that the relationships she fostered aboard these luxury vessels opened doors that might have otherwise remained shut. The film hints at powerful executives, film producers, and even political figures who allegedly met Meghan during these exclusive events. Whether these connections were purely social or something more remains speculative, but the filmmakers suggest that they were significant enough to merit further investigation. There is a particularly striking moment when the film introduces a former event planner who claims to have booked Meghan for several yacht appearances in the early 2000s. His voice is disguised, but his recollections are clear. She was ambitious, he says, always talking about the next step, always looking for the right connection. He describes how Meghan moved effortlessly between groups, charming those around her with ease and confidence. You could tell she was going places. It wasn't a question of if, but when. The documentary does not shy away from drawing comparisons to other well-known figures who have been linked to yachting circles. It discusses how several Hollywood actresses and socialites have had their careers bolstered through these hidden networks, using the platform to build relationships that would propel them into the public eye. The filmmakers argue that Meghan's trajectory was no different, a rise built on strategic networking and calculated appearances that eventually led to her meeting Prince Harry. To support its claims, the film presents further anonymous testimonies from yacht crew members who allege that Meghan was a regular at certain events. One particularly damning account comes from a former chef who worked aboard a yacht frequented by European royalty. He recalls seeing Meghan on board during a summer excursion and describes how she navigated conversations with high-profile guests. She wasn't just there to smile and wave, he insists. She was there with a purpose. You could see it in the way she carried herself. Yet, despite the compelling testimonies, the documentary faces a crucial hurdle: lack of undeniable proof. Much of the evidence presented is circumstantial: blurred photographs, anonymous interviews, and speculative connections. The filmmakers acknowledge this gap, admitting that many of their sources would only speak under conditions of anonymity for fear of legal repercussions. Still, they insist that the volume of testimony and the consistency of the stories cannot be ignored. As the documentary closes this segment, it leaves viewers with a haunting question. Was Meghan's path to royalty truly one of destiny and fairy tale romance, or was it a calculated ascent built upon powerful connections forged in secret? The narrator pauses, allowing the weight of the question to settle before the screen fades to black, signaling a transition to the next chapter, the deeper look into how the palace handled Meghan's controversial past. The documentary does not slow its pace. Instead, it shifts gears to explore the intricate dynamics between Meghan's supposed past and the royal institution's handling of that history. This segment opens with a sweeping view of Buckingham Palace, its grandeur contrasting sharply with the murky allegations presented just moments before. The narrator's voice grows somber as it describes the significance of protecting the royal image at all costs, a tradition that spans centuries. It is here that the filmmakers begin to unravel the complex web of influence, manipulation, and secrecy that allegedly surrounded Meghan's introduction into the royal family. The screen fades into an interview with a former royal aide, their face hidden in shadow, voice altered to protect their identity. The aide describes how the palace, upon learning of Prince Harry's relationship with Meghan Markle, initiated what is referred to as a vetting process. According to the aide, this process is standard procedure for anyone entering the royal circle, especially those who may become part of the monarchy's public image. Background checks are conducted, private investigators are hired, and any potential vulnerabilities are meticulously cataloged. The aide claims that it was during this vetting process that Meghan's alleged connections to yachting first surfaced. The filmmakers juxtapose this revelation with archival footage of Meghan and Harry's early romance. They are seen smiling for cameras, waving to adoring crowds, and embracing each other with the enthusiasm of a newly engaged couple. But behind the scenes, the documentary claims, there was turmoil. The narrator describes an internal struggle within the royal household, with some members of the institution reportedly concerned about Meghan's background. According to sources close to the palace, there were heated discussions about how much of Meghan's past should be disclosed to the public and, more critically, to the Queen herself. The documentary underscores this claim with testimonies from supposed insiders who allege that Harry was warned, repeatedly, about the risks of pursuing his relationship with Meghan. One insider, who identifies himself only as a longtime royal confidant, states that Harry was told, in no uncertain terms, that Meghan's past would come back to haunt the royal family. He didn't want to hear it, the confidant says. He was blinded by love, completely smitten. But the palace was in crisis mode. They knew that if even a fraction of the rumors were true, it would be catastrophic. The film shifts to examine how the palace reportedly sought to manage the narrative. The narrator describes a series of strategic decisions made to distance Meghan from her Hollywood past and present her as a philanthropic figure instead. Archival footage plays of Meghan visiting schools in impoverished areas, speaking at women's rights events, and attending charity galas. The documentary asserts that this rebranding was no accident, It was a calculated effort by the royal media team to divert attention from the rumors and solidify Meghan's image as a humanitarian. The phrase Duchess of Compassion flashes across the screen, followed by a montage of magazine covers and headlines celebrating Meghan's newfound status as a royal trailblazer. But as the documentary points out, not everyone was convinced by the transformation. British tabloids continued to dig into Meghan's past, unearthing stories of her time in Hollywood, her strained relationship with her father, and whispers of scandal that had yet to be substantiated. It was during this time that the rumors of her involvement in the yachting world resurfaced, this time with more fervor. Anonymous blogs and underground websites began publishing allegations that Meghan had once been part of a high-end circle of women who entertained powerful men aboard luxury yachts. At first, these stories were dismissed as conspiracy theories, wild fabrications designed to smear her reputation. But the documentary insists that the truth was far more complicated. To support its claims, the film introduces a shadowy figure known only as the broker. His face is obscured, and his voice is distorted, but his words are clear and deliberate. He describes how exclusive yacht parties were organized off the coasts of Monaco, Dubai, and the Mediterranean, where the rich and powerful would gather for weeks at a time. According to him, Meghan was one of many aspiring actresses who participated in these events, leveraging the connections she made to further her career. He explains that the women who attended were not always paid directly. Instead, their appearances were compensated through gifts, travel opportunities, and the chance to mingle with industry elites. The filmmakers pause here, allowing the weight of the allegations to sink in before cutting to an interview with a former crew member from one of the yachts in question. She speaks under the condition of anonymity, her voice trembling slightly as she recounts the lavish parties, the extravagant dinners, and the unspoken understanding that discretion was expected of everyone on board. "You didn't ask questions," she says. "You didn't take pictures. What happened on the yacht stayed on the yacht." Her account is chilling, not for its sensationalism, but for its matter-of-fact delivery, as if this hidden world of privilege and secrecy was simply business as usual. The documentary then explores how the palace allegedly responded to these resurfacing rumors. According to the filmmakers, a strategic media campaign was launched to overwhelm the news cycle with positive stories about Meghan's charitable endeavors. Headlines about her humanitarian trips, speeches on women's rights, and support for mental health initiatives dominated the press. The aim, the documentary claims, was to drown out the whispers of her alleged past and solidify her role as a beacon of progressive royal values. However, the film also suggests that behind the scenes, there was panic. Emails purportedly leaked from royal staffers show a flurry of communication regarding Meghan's public image. One email, displayed on screen with certain sections redacted, references a damage control strategy to manage any fallout should the rumors gain traction. Another email speaks of coordinating with key media outlets to suppress damaging stories and promote narratives that aligned with the palace's vision of Meghan as a transformative force for the monarchy. The documentary then introduces a particularly explosive claim that Meghan's alleged connections to yachting were not entirely unknown to Prince Harry. According to an anonymous source described as a former friend of Harry's inner circle, he was made aware of Meghan's past before their engagement. The source alleges that Harry brushed off the concerns, stating that Meghan's past did not define her present and that he loved her regardless. This revelation is delivered with dramatic effect, the screen fading to black as the narrator poses the question. Did Harry knowingly accept Meghan's hidden history as part of his decision to marry her? Or was he blind to the depth of her alleged involvement? The documentary closes this segment with a series of rapid cuts, Meghan waving to crowds at her wedding, Harry beaming with pride, and the royal family gathered on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. The narrator's voice lowers, almost to a whisper, as the film hints at more revelations to come. The past, the narrator intones, is never truly buried. It lingers, just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to rise again. The screen goes dark, and the tension lingers in the silence. The filmmakers have set the stage for what is to come, the exploration of Meghan's rise to royalty and the ghosts of her past that threaten to pull her back into the shadows. The documentary resumes with an unflinching examination of the events leading up to Meghan's royal engagement. It spares no detail in chronicling how her relationship with Prince Harry unfolded, meticulously linking her connections in the world of yachting to influential figures who allegedly facilitated introductions that would eventually lead her to the British royal family. The narration is crisp, calculated, each word carefully chosen to underscore the gravity of the claims being made. In this segment, the filmmakers focus on Meghan's social climb, a journey marked by strategic alliances and calculated appearances. Through interviews with former friends and associates, the documentary attempts to map out the path Meghan took from aspiring actress to duchess, suggesting that her connections with high-profile individuals aboard luxury yachts were far from incidental. One interviewee, whose face is obscured for anonymity, claims that Meghan was always aware of where she needed to be and who she needed to meet. She wasn't just socializing for fun, the source says. She had a plan. You could see it. She was always working an angle, always finding a way to make the right connections. The filmmakers introduce a particularly compelling figure during this portion of the documentary, a Middle Eastern business tycoon known for hosting lavish yacht parties in Monaco. Described as a kingmaker of sorts, he is alleged to have connections with Hollywood elite, European royalty, and high-profile politicians. His yacht, famously dubbed the Floating Palace, is a well-known hub for celebrities looking to expand their networks discreetly. According to the documentary, Meghan was introduced to him during a summer gala, an introduction that would set off a chain of events ultimately leading to her meeting Prince Harry. The film presents snippets of conversations from unnamed sources who claim to have witnessed Meghan aboard the Floating Palace. They describe her as poised and articulate, someone who could seamlessly blend into any social setting. She knew how to charm, one source remarks. I saw her sit with oil magnates, real estate tycoons, even a few heads of state. She knew how to navigate those rooms. The documentary posits that it was through these yacht connections that Meghan gained access to an inner circle that stretched far beyond Hollywood, a circle that included aristocrats and influential businessmen who had direct links to the British elite. One of the more explosive allegations comes from a former yacht steward who speaks under condition of anonymity. He describes Meghan as a frequent guest at events hosted in the Mediterranean, where she was often seen engaging with affluent guests. According to his account, Meghan was strategic, always positioning herself near those with influence and power. It wasn't about partying for her, he insists. It was about making connections. She wasn't there to be just another face in the crowd. She was there to stand out. The documentary then shifts focus to Meghan's move to Toronto for her role in the television series Suits. It paints her relocation not merely as a career decision, but as a strategic move that placed her in proximity to key political and business figures. The filmmakers suggest that her newfound role brought with it invitations to high-profile events, charity galas, political fundraisers, and private yacht parties where the wealthy and powerful gathered away from the glare of the paparazzi. The documentary claims that Meghan's connections to the Floating Palace remained intact during this time, allowing her to continue building her network while simultaneously enhancing her public persona as a rising actress. One particularly telling segment of the documentary highlights a private gala hosted in Toronto in 2015, where Meghan was photographed alongside several notable figures, including diplomats and business moguls. The filmmakers zoom in on these photographs, suggesting that Meghan's presence at such events was no mere coincidence. According to the documentary, these gatherings were crucial for fostering relationships that would later prove instrumental in her royal ascent. The documentary then pivots to her meeting with Prince Harry. It explores the widely accepted narrative that they were introduced by a mutual friend, contrasting it with claims from insiders who allege that Meghan had been strategically positioning herself within circles that would increase her chances of encountering British royalty. The film stops short of declaring that her relationship with Harry was premeditated, but it heavily implies that her connections, many of which were formed aboard yachts and at exclusive galas, played a role in her introduction to the prince. To back up its claims, the documentary displays travel logs, flight records, and photographs that allegedly place Meghan at various high-profile events across Europe during key moments. It even goes so far as to suggest that her travel patterns coincided with those of Prince Harry before their official introduction, hinting at the possibility that their paths may have crossed earlier than publicly acknowledged. The filmmakers present this as evidence of a well-coordinated social climb, one that spanned continents and industries. In an effort to further substantiate these allegations, the documentary interviews a former public relations executive who claims to have worked with Meghan during her Toronto years. The executive, whose identity is concealed, describes Meghan as intensely focused on building her brand and expanding her influence. She was always networking, the executive recalls. Always finding ways to get invited to the right events, always seeking out the right people to connect with. According to this source, Meghan's ambition was palpable, a driving force that propelled her into spaces typically reserved for the world's elite. The filmmakers pressed the issue further, suggesting that the palace may have been aware of Meghan's connections long before her engagement to Harry. They present a theory that the royal institution conducted its own background checks, uncovering her associations with powerful individuals from her time in Toronto and her alleged appearances aboard luxury yachts. The documentary implies that while this information was known, it was strategically buried to avoid public scrutiny and maintain the fairy tale narrative that had captured global attention. At this point in the documentary, the tone shifts dramatically. The filmmakers explore the potential fallout if these allegations were to be substantiated. They speculate on the ramifications for the royal family, particularly the Queen, who is portrayed as a figure of tradition and propriety. The narrator questions how much the Queen knew, and if she was deliberately kept in the dark to preserve the image of unity and strength that the monarchy projects to the world. The documentary closes this segment with a montage of Meghan and Harry's engagement announcement, the smiles, the public displays of affection, the worldwide adoration. The filmmakers pause, allowing the weight of the allegations to settle before cutting back to a shot of the floating palace gliding through turquoise waters, its silhouette stark against the horizon. The narrator's voice drops to a whisper, almost conspiratorial, as he questions if Meghan's rise was indeed a fairy tale, or something far more calculated. The screen goes black, and the silence that follows is deafening. It is clear that the filmmakers are not done, and the next segment promises to delve even deeper into the mechanisms of power and influence that allegedly paved Meghan's path to royalty. The next segment of the documentary opens with sweeping drone footage of Buckingham Palace, its towering gates and pristine gardens a stark reminder of the power and tradition it represents. The narrator's voice is steady, almost reverent, as he describes the centuries-old institution that Meghan Markle married into, a family bound by rules, legacy, and unyielding control over its public image. It is against this backdrop that the documentary sets the stage for one of its most controversial claims, that the palace, fully aware of Meghan's past, orchestrated a campaign to bury any connections that could tarnish the royal reputation. The screen shifts to an interview with a former palace staffer, their face blurred, voice distorted for anonymity. The staffer claims that upon Meghan's engagement to Prince Harry, a team of advisors, public relations experts, and legal professionals were assembled to conduct what was referred to internally as Operation Clean Slate. The staffer explains that this operation was designed to identify and eliminate any compromising stories that could emerge from Meghan's past, particularly those tied to her alleged outing appearances. The documentary supports this claim by presenting what it describes as leaked emails and internal communications between palace aides and private investigators. These messages, though heavily redacted, seem to outline a systematic effort to silence anyone who might speak out against Meghan's background. One email displayed on the screen highlights a payment to a tabloid editor in exchange for pulling a story related to Meghan's time in Monaco. The editor, whose identity is concealed, is quoted as saying, "The palace doesn't ask twice. When they want something gone, it disappears." To bolster these allegations, the documentary introduces an anonymous journalist who claims to have been approached by royal representatives with an offer of exclusive access in exchange for dropping a story about Meghan's alleged connections to high-profile yacht events. The journalist, whose face is obscured by shadows, recalls the encounter vividly. "They didn't threaten me," the journalist insists. "They just made it clear that there would be benefits from my cooperation. I'd get first access to royal announcements, exclusive interviews. It was a deal, plain and simple." This segment is punctuated with dramatic cuts to headlines from that period, stories celebrating Meghan's humanitarian work, her stylish wardrobe, her charitable endeavors, while the darker rumors remained firmly out of print. The documentary shifts focus to the early days of Meghan's marriage to Harry, painting a picture of a carefully orchestrated media campaign designed to solidify her image as a royal philanthropist. Archival footage shows her cradling newborns in underprivileged communities, attending global summits, and championing causes related to women's rights and education. The filmmakers argue that this public image was not merely organic, but meticulously curated to bury any whispers of her past life. It suggests that Meghan's transition from actress to duchess was more than just a personal evolution. It was a masterclass in public relations. The film then explores the deeper implications of this alleged cover-up, questioning how much Prince Harry knew and how far the palace was willing to go to protect its reputation. According to sources interviewed for the documentary, Harry was briefed on Meghan's past during their engagement, but was assured by palace advisors that it had been handled. One source, described as a close confidant of Harry's, claims that he was urged to focus on the future and leave any rumors behind. They told him it was all noise, just tabloid trash. He believed them. He wanted to believe them, the source recalls. The film lingers on this point, suggesting that Harry's love for Meghan blinded him to the complexities of her past, complexities that the palace was working overtime to suppress. The filmmakers move on to analyze the royal family's history of managing scandals, drawing parallels between Meghan's alleged past and other controversies that have rocked the monarchy. They highlight the infamous Squidgegate tapes, the scandal surrounding Prince Andrew, and even the abdication of King Edward VIII, suggesting that the royal institution is well practiced in the art of damage control. Archival footage of Queen Elizabeth addressing the nation during moments of crisis serves as a stark reminder of the monarchy's resilience in the face of controversy. But the documentary insists that Meghan's case was different. Unlike previous scandals that involved direct members of the royal family, Meghan's background was rooted in Hollywood, a world that thrives on visibility and exposure. Her past connections to powerful individuals, her appearances at exclusive events, and the whispers of yachting were all potential threats to the palace's tightly controlled narrative. The documentary claims that this is why Operation Clean Slate was allegedly initiated, not just to protect Meghan, but to preserve the monarchy itself. To drive this point home, the filmmakers present testimonies from anonymous sources within British media, each recounting experiences of being pressured to drop stories about Meghan's past. One editor describes a particularly tense meeting with representatives from the palace after his outlet ran a story speculating about Meghan's connections in Monaco. They came down hard, he says. We were told in no uncertain terms that continuing to run stories like that would result in losing our access to royal events, interviews, everything. He pauses before adding, "You don't go up against the palace and win. It's just not done." The documentary also touches on Meghan's own attempts to control her narrative, citing interviews where she refuted claims about her past with measured deflections and strategic silence. Clips from television appearances are played, showing Meghan laughing off rumors as ridiculous tabloid fiction and expressing disbelief at the lengths some would go to tarnish her name. The filmmakers suggest that Meghan's handling of these accusations was not mere coincidence, but part of a coordinated effort to dismiss, discredit, and disarm her critics. In a particularly striking moment, the film shifts to footage of Meghan and Harry during their royal tour of Australia. The camera lingers on Meghan, waving to crowds, holding Harry's hand, smiling gracefully as she greets dignitaries. The narrator's voice cuts in, almost a whisper, as it questions the reality behind the fairy tale image. Did the world fall in love with a duchess, he asks, or with a carefully crafted illusion? The question is left unanswered, hanging in the silence that follows. The segment closes with a final reflection on the power of influence within the monarchy. It describes how the palace, through its alliances with media conglomerates and political figures, has historically shaped the narrative to protect its own. Meghan's past, the filmmakers argue, was simply the latest chapter in a long tradition of controlling the story. They hint that the revelations uncovered so far are just the beginning, promising deeper explorations into Meghan's rise to royalty and the secrets that may have been left buried in its wake. The screen fades to black. The silence is heavy, almost suffocating. The narrator's final words echo in the darkness. In the monarchy, the past is not erased, it is rewritten. The next segment of the documentary opens with a stark image of flashing paparazzi cameras, their strobe-like flashes illuminating the night as Meghan Markle steps out of a black car. The crowd swarms around her, voices shouting questions, photographers jostling for the perfect shot. The narrator's voice cuts through the noise, somber and deliberate, detailing how Meghan's rise to royalty brought with it a relentless scrutiny that only intensified as whispers of her alleged past began to circulate. The documentary transitions to a montage of tabloid covers. headlines screaming accusations, allegations, and unverified rumors about Meghan's pre-royal life. The filmmakers suggest that while many of these stories were dismissed as sensationalism, there were threads of truth that persisted, stubbornly clinging to the public narrative despite Buckingham Palace's best efforts to suppress them. One such thread, the film posits, was Meghan's alleged involvement in the high-end yachting scene, a claim that, according to the documentary, never fully disappeared, even after her royal wedding. In an effort to substantiate these claims, the documentary shifts to an interview with a former investigative journalist who spent years covering elite social circles. His face is shadowed, voice altered to mask his identity, but his words are clear and deliberate. He claims that Meghan was a well-known figure in certain circles during her time as a rising actress, often attending exclusive yacht parties hosted by influential business moguls and European elites. According to him, these events were not just social gatherings. They were strategic networking opportunities where actresses, models, and aspiring celebrities would mingle with powerful men who could influence their careers. The journalist recounts how these yacht events were often shrouded in secrecy, with guests required to sign non-disclosure agreements and staff sworn to silence. He explains that the stakes were high. These gatherings were more than just parties. They were environments where power was traded, deals were struck, and connections were solidified. For actresses like Meghan, he suggests, these events provided opportunities to meet influential figures who could open doors that would otherwise remain shut. You have to understand, he emphasizes, these yachts weren't just about luxury. They were about access. And access is everything in Hollywood. The filmmakers present photographs from some of these yacht events. Opulent parties on the decks of multi-million-dollar vessels, champagne flutes raised in celebration, the glittering lights of Monaco or St. Tropez sparkling in the background. While Meghan is not explicitly identified in these images, the narrator hints that her presence was often noted by those in attendance, though rarely captured on camera. The documentary implies that her ability to move through these circles with minimal exposure was not by chance but by design. The documentary then shifts focus to Meghan's time in Toronto during her role on the television series Suits. It describes how her position in the entertainment industry allowed her to maintain connections with influential individuals she had met during her yachting appearances. According to several anonymous sources, Meghan was strategic in leveraging these relationships to bolster her public image. One source, identified only as a former event planner, recalls seeing Meghan at private gatherings hosted by foreign dignitaries and media tycoons. He describes her as charming, always impeccably dressed, and always in the right place at the right time. The filmmakers present a timeline of events, suggesting that Meghan's appearances at these gatherings coincided with key moments in her career. They point to her sudden elevation within Hollywood circles, her rapid ascent from supporting roles to a lead in Suits, and her increased visibility in charitable and political events. The documentary suggests that these advancements were not purely coincidental but the result of carefully nurtured relationships with powerful backers she allegedly met during her time aboard these luxury yachts. The screen cuts to an interview with a former publicist who claims to have worked with Meghan in the early 2010s. Her face is blurred, voice modulated, but her story is compelling. She describes Meghan as incredibly driven, someone who was always calculating her next move. She knew how to network, the publicist explains. She knew the right parties to go to, the right people to talk to, and she always made sure she was seen. The publicist hints that Meghan's appearances at yacht events were part of a larger strategy to climb the social ladder, one that eventually led her to the British royal family. To add further weight to the narrative, the documentary shifts back to the alleged Operation Clean Slate, the supposed palace-led campaign to scrub any remnants of Meghan's pre-royal connections. An unnamed palace aide is interviewed, their voice distorted, but their words clear. They describe how, after Meghan and Harry's engagement was announced, there was a flurry of activity behind closed doors, calls made, deals struck, stories buried. There were entire archives wiped, the aide claims. Photos disappeared from databases, articles were retracted or edited. It was like watching history being rewritten in real time. The filmmakers juxtapose this testimony with clips from Meghan's public appearances during the early days of her royal life. She is seen greeting children at charity events, attending state dinners, and delivering speeches on equality and women's rights. The documentary suggests that this rebranding was no mere coincidence. It was part of a strategic effort to distance her from her past and establish her as a progressive force within the monarchy. But the documentary does not stop there. It goes on to explore the backlash that erupted when rumors of Meghan's yachting resurfaced during her pregnancy with Archie. The filmmakers claim that palace officials were once again forced to intervene, reaching out to media outlets to suppress the story. A former tabloid editor is interviewed, his voice confident and unapologetic. He recalls being contacted by representatives from the palace who urged him to reconsider running a story that tied Meghan to her alleged yachting connections. "They didn't threaten me," he says with a chuckle. "They didn't have to. The implication was clear: publish that story, and you're off the guest list for royal events. No more access. No more exclusives." The documentary closes this segment with a montage of Meghan and Harry's most public moments. Their wedding, their charity appearances, their interview with Oprah, contrasted with the shadowy allegations that continue to swirl beneath the surface. The narrator's voice is soft, almost conspiratorial, as it poses the question: how much of what we know is real, and how much has been carefully manufactured for the sake of a perfect image? The screen fades to black, and silence fills the void. It is clear that the documentary is building momentum, each segment adding another layer of intrigue, another whisper of scandal, another suggestion that the fairy tale the world has come to believe might be something else entirely. The documentary resumes with a new level of intensity, diving deeper into the claims that Meghan's rise to royalty was not purely serendipitous but a carefully orchestrated series of strategic moves designed to elevate her status. The narrator's voice, steady and deliberate, recounts the tale of Meghan's introduction to elite social circles, events that were far more exclusive than red carpet galas or charity fundraisers. It suggests that Meghan's connections to powerful figures within the yachting community not only facilitated her career in Hollywood but also paved the way for her entry into the British royal family. The screen shifts to grainy, low-resolution footage of luxury yacht parties off the coast of Monaco and Saint-Tropez. The camera sweeps over guests dressed in opulent evening wear, champagne glasses raised high as they toast under the Mediterranean sun. The narrator explains that these gatherings were not simply lavish get-togethers. They were networking hubs where actresses, models, and socialites mingled with influential businessmen, political figures, and even European royalty. The filmmakers present this as the hidden side of celebrity life, a world where introductions were made, favors exchanged, and fortunes elevated. The documentary then pivots to a series of anonymous interviews with former yacht staff and event organizers. Their faces are blurred, voices altered to protect their identities, but their stories are strikingly consistent. One former yacht steward describes how certain guests, including aspiring actresses, would be flown in specifically for high-profile events. Their appearances arranged by third-party agencies that handled everything from travel logistics to confidentiality agreements. He claims that these women, though presented as models or promotional ambassadors, were often expected to entertain guests in ways that went far beyond simple mingling. Another interviewee, identified only as a former yacht broker, recounts how these exclusive parties would sometimes last for days, with guests arriving and departing by private helicopter. He describes how Meghan, during her early Hollywood years, was allegedly introduced to these circles through mutual friends who frequented yacht parties in the Mediterranean. According to him, Meghan's charm and ambition made her a popular guest, and her presence at these gatherings was not unusual. She fit right in, he recalls. She knew how to navigate those rooms, always engaging, always smiling. You could tell she was working towards something bigger. The filmmakers then present what they describe as corroborating evidence: old flight records, passenger manifests from private charters, and yacht registry logs that purportedly show Meghan's name among the list of guests at several events during the summers of 2013 and 2014. These records, although partially redacted, suggest that Meghan was present at multiple gatherings alongside influential businessmen and European elites. The documentary does not claim that these appearances were inherently scandalous, but it does imply that these events served as a platform for networking with individuals who would later become key players in her rise to global fame. The narrative takes a dramatic turn when the documentary explores the role of an influential London-based PR agency that allegedly managed Meghan's appearances during this time. The filmmakers suggest that this agency, which specializes in high-profile event placements and strategic networking, was instrumental in securing Meghan's invitations to yacht parties, exclusive galas, and private gatherings with billionaires and aristocrats. An anonymous source described as a former public relations coordinator claims that Meghan's trajectory was anything but accidental. There were always whispers, she says. People knew she had powerful friends. She was making the right moves, meeting the right people. It wasn't just about acting, it was about positioning. To substantiate these claims, the documentary cuts to interviews with media insiders who describe how certain celebrity stories are curated long before they reach the public eye. One former tabloid editor explains how narratives are crafted to enhance a celebrity's image or protect them from damaging allegations. He claims that Meghan's past connections were intentionally downplayed once her relationship with Prince Harry became public knowledge. You don't just go from Hollywood actress to Duchess without leaving some footprints, he says. But the palace made sure those footprints were wiped clean before the world could follow them. The filmmakers linger on this notion, presenting it as evidence of a larger strategy, one that involved not only public relations firms but also influential figures within the royal institution. The documentary revisits the concept of Operation Clean Slate, suggesting that Meghan's social ties and rumored appearances at elite gatherings were methodically erased from public record through legal agreements and strategic media partnerships. Former aides are interviewed anonymously, describing how certain journalists were encouraged to look the other way when it came to Meghan's past. It was understood, one aide claims. If you wanted to maintain access to royal events and exclusives, you didn't ask certain questions. The documentary transitions to an exploration of how Meghan's royal wedding was portrayed as the ultimate fairy tale, a commoner joining the House of Windsor in a grand display of unity and love. Archival footage plays of Meghan stepping out of her wedding car, veiled and radiant, as the crowd erupts into cheers. The filmmakers suggest that this image was purposefully cultivated to distance her from the whispers of her pre-royal life. They wanted her to be seen as pure, as untouched by scandal, the narrator intones. A duchess fit for a prince. However, the documentary hints that not everyone within the royal circle was convinced by the transformation. An anonymous royal insider claims that Meghan's past was well known among senior members of the institution, leading to internal debates about how best to manage her public image. According to this source, there were concerns that her connections and rumored involvement in yacht culture could resurface, potentially embarrassing the royal family. There were discussions, the insider states, quiet ones, behind closed doors. They wanted to make sure everything was contained. The filmmakers drive this point home by highlighting Meghan's transition into royal duties, which they claim was orchestrated with precision and careful planning. They analyze her first public appearances, her charitable engagements, and her role in high-profile initiatives as part of a calculated strategy to redefine her image. It was flawless, one media strategist remarks. Every step was choreographed to establish her as a global humanitarian and a symbol of modern royalty. But as the documentary suggests, the past is never truly erased. It hints that certain secrets still linger, hidden beneath layers of legal protection and carefully managed narratives. The filmmakers promise that more revelations are yet to come, teasing at deeper connections and unspoken truths that could unravel the carefully constructed facade of royal perfection. The segment closes with a sweeping aerial shot of Buckingham Palace under the glow of twilight, the Union Jack waving solemnly in the wind. The narrator's voice returns, softer but resolute, posing a final question before the screen fades to black. When power and privilege are threatened, how far will the establishment go to protect its own? The documentary resumes with a dramatic shift in tone. Gone are the serene shots of Buckingham Palace and the glittering Mediterranean coast. Instead, the screen fades into the bustling chaos of paparazzi-laden streets, with flashbulbs igniting in rapid succession as Meghan Markle steps out of black SUVs, hand in hand with Prince Harry. The narrator's voice, firm and resolute, explains that despite Buckingham Palace's best efforts to sanitize Meghan's image, whispers of her past never truly disappeared. In fact, as her prominence within the royal family grew, so too did the intensity of the rumors surrounding her alleged yachting connections. The filmmakers turned their focus to the relentless scrutiny Meghan faced from the British press. Archival footage displays tabloid covers splashed with headlines hinting at scandal, cryptic allegations of Hollywood secrets, and hidden pasts. The documentary asserts that while much of this coverage was dismissed as baseless tabloid fodder, there were nuggets of truth that evaded suppression. One particular headline is highlighted, a now infamous cover that hinted at Meghan's dark connections with European elites. According to the documentary, this story was swiftly pulled from circulation, with the publisher later issuing a retraction that many journalists found suspiciously abrupt. To shed light on this, the filmmakers interview an anonymous former tabloid editor who claims to have first-hand knowledge of how this story was buried. His voice is distorted, and his silhouette is barely visible against a dimly lit backdrop. He explains how certain stories, especially those involving the royals, are often pulled not because they are false, but because the consequences of their publication could be damaging. He alleges that he received a call from a high-ranking official at Buckingham Palace, urging him to reconsider running the piece. It wasn't a threat, he clarifies. But it was made very clear that if I wanted access to royal events, I would need to make the right choice. The editor describes it as the invisible hand of the monarchy, an influence that extends far beyond palace walls and into newsrooms across the country. The documentary